Everyone, I'd like to say welcome. Time appears to be 1:30. Pursuant to the City of Roanoke's emergency ordinance adopted by the RVTPO Policy Board on April 23rd, 2020, and the 2020 Virginia General Assembly legislation H-29 enacted April 24, 2020, the January meeting of the TTC will be held virtually on Thursday, January 14th, 2021 at 1:30 p.m. via Zoom. If you're looking for a different meeting, you're in the wrong place. Under the current state of emergency, until further notice, it's been deemed unsafe to assemble a quorum of public body in one place. Any members of the public may view and participate in the meeting through electronic means. Meeting details are listed on the second page of the agenda. All materials made available to the members will be made available to the public at the same time by posting on the RVARC website. I'll now call the meeting to order, and Christina, could you call the roll, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mariel Fowler.
Here.
Peter Vollison. Cody Sexton. Dan Brew.
I'm here.
Megan Cronice.
Here.
Will Crawford.
Here.
Chris Chittum.
I'm here.
Mark Jameson.
Here.
Ben Tripp.
Here?
Anita McMillan.
Here.
Nathan McClung.
Here.
Dorian Allen. I see Dorian listed. Are you there, Dorian?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, here.
Great. Richard Osborne. Liz Belcher.
Here.
Nathan Sanford.
Here.
Dan Sonnenklar. Michael Gray.
Here.
And our non-voting member, Kevin Jones.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Christina. We'll move on to item 2, approval of the consent agenda items. There's a couple things in there, folks. The agenda, some minutes, the safety performance measure targets, which I believed we discussed at length last time. Mark, I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to say on that. And then also item E, action on the public transportation safety plan performance measure targets. Those two, of course, are related. Are there any objections to the consent agenda or any discussion before we call for a motion?
Mr. Chair, I did receive a couple minor spelling edits that I can make to the minutes.
Thank you. Anyone else? In that case, I'll call for a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minute with the minor correction that Krista mentioned.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there a second?
Second, it's Mark Jameson.
Thank you. Christine, do we need a roll call on it, or I guess
Yes.
see if everyone's here? Could you call the roll, please?
Okay. Mariel Fowler.
Yes.
Dan Brew.
Yes.
Megan Cronice.
Yes. Sorry.
Will Crawford.
Yes.
Chris Chittum.
Yes.
Mark Jameson.
Yes.
Ben Tripp.
Aye.
Anita McMillan.
Yes.
Nathan McClung.
Yes.
Dorian Allen.
Yes.
Liz Belcher.
Yes.
Nathan Sanford.
Aye.
Dan Sonnenklar.
Yes.
Michael Gray.
Yes.
And that motion passes.
Thank you. That'll take us on to item 3, Chairman's remarks. I don't really have a lot of remarks. I do want to kind of draw your attention or everyone's attention to the next item and discuss as we start to talk about STBG and putting together a financial plan, that what we've got here is really for the purposes of discussion that was sent out, and we'll have several opportunities to look at this and work on it over time. So I'm looking forward to that discussion. Let's see. Christina, is there anything you'd like to add generally before we move on to that?
Sure, I could just mention, Mr. Chair, that the work program process has initiated, and all of the administrators have received a letter to that effect. So I just wanted to make all of the technical committee members aware of that as well.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next item then.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this is Cody. I apologize for joining late, but I wanted to make sure that my attendance was recorded for the upcoming action.
Chair acknowledges Mr. Cody's presence. All right, Christina, you want to take us into item 4?
Yes. All right. So we are initiating the annual adjustment process for the STBG program. What I provided for you in the agenda packet is a status of all of the current projects. There are some adjustments that are noted that have been requested to the total amount granted to the project. We'll also be looking during this process at the timing of funds. So I've also noted that there are a number of things that go into this process, and as the chair noted, we do have a few months to work on this. So the actions that are noted in the staff report are just if there are any items that we can get your recommendation on as we go, that might help facilitate the process. If there are simple things to make recommendations on sooner, we don't have to save everything for the end. So normally we try to get all of the information now to you that we know, and then of course smart scale scores will be coming out next week, and so we'll know more information then about the status of the projects that are seeking smart scale funding and the conditional committed funds from the STBG program. And ideally, we aim to try to get a financial plan recommended to the board by March, the TTC's March meeting, so that it can get rolled up into VDOT's and DRPT's 6-year improvement program process. That way it can go for public hearing in the spring. However, this is the TPO's program, so if it doesn't follow the state's timeline, that's okay. It is however much time the group needs to work through the issues is what you have. So I'm not going to go through the status of each of the projects because it is provided in the staff report. I just want to focus mainly on the funding requests, which are on page 34 of the agenda packet. So we've received word from the city of Roanoke about the Roanoke River Greenway project from the city of Salem line to Bridge Street. And of course that has been completed up until the Norfolk Southern Materials Yard, but the Bridge the Gap portion will be moving forward, but it won't be using STBG funds. There was somehow a miscommunication. The city's project manager wasn't aware, and I guess the VDOT folks that he was working with weren't aware that the 4.3 million that is noted in the 6-year financial plan was available. And so the project agreement was drafted and approved at $750,000 less. And so that money is not being used on the project now. So that is being returned so that the TPO can determine the best use of it. And then the city will continue with finishing that project with just the revenue sharing funds and don't have the federal oversight requirements. And it can move along quicker. That being said, the city has also asked for $750,000 to put towards construction on another portion of the Roanoke River Greenway, which is further down on the list of the financial plan. It's on the eastern end. And they had received PE and right-of-way money through the STBG program last year. They haven't started yet. They're on hold right now, waiting for VDOT to initiate agreement. So they don't have a construction cost estimate at this time that I'm aware of. So that money would go towards construction, but the full cost of construction is unknown, is their request. Some other items, the city also has the Tinker Creek Trail Extension project, and it's uncertain right now if that project will need more money because the construction market being what it is, they think they might know in 6 to 12 months if they need additional money for Tinker Creek Trail. In talking with Benton, they are anticipating needing more money for the Walnut Avenue bicycle and pedestrian accommodations from Wesley Avenue to First Street. Don't know what that amount will be yet, but I've heard from Anita that she hopes to know that by the end of the month. Let me stick with Benton for a minute, and there is the Gus Nix Boulevard crosswalk project, which was approved last year for $169,650. The updated VDOT cost estimate shows that it would be over $403,000 to build that project. So Benton is asking for additional funds, not the $20,000 that I had noted in the staff report. That's what I heard at that time, but the updated amount is actually $234,262 that Benton is requesting to build that project. All right, moving on to Roanoke County. They anticipate needing money for the Orange Market Park and Ride parking lot improvements, some of the features that were supposed to be built with the roundabout project at Route 311, 419, because of budgets being what they are on that project, are not able to be constructed there. So in order to build this SDBG project the way they want to, they need to incorporate some of those elements like curbing, but they haven't gotten that cost estimate yet and hope to know that soon. I will note, talking about Roanoke County's project, I accidentally on page 36 of the agenda packet, which is the draft STBG financial plan, noted that it was the county's Roanoke River Greenway project that was returning $750,000. That is not correct. It is the project right above it, which is the city's Roanoke River Greenway from City of Salem to Bridge Street. So note that error in that plan. Okay, and then the last one here for Roanoke County, Oak Grove Streetscape Improvements, the crosswalk. That project is requesting an additional $82,000. So a lot of moving parts to developing this financial plan. Some elements we know about today, some elements we still don't know about, and then of course all the smart skill, the fallout from whatever will happen next week will certainly play into this. So initially, I was thinking there could be some action items. There's the exit 140 park and ride reconstruction, which has been completed for a few years, but these projects take a few years to close out in VDOT's financial systems, and that has actually taken place. So that one can be removed from the financial plan, accepting the return of $750,000 from the city's Roanoke River Greenway, City of Salem to Bridge Street project can happen. I heard from Anita that she would like the group to consider recommending the increase for the Gus Nix Boulevard pedestrian and bicycle crossing by $234,262. So that's something that could be considered today, as well as the county's Oak Grove Streetscape Improvements crosswalk project, asking for an additional $82,000. So you know part of the story today, you don't know the full story. And then of course, the other one that's not on here, which would be number 5, is the city's request for construction funds of that $750,000 to go towards the Roanoke River Greenway East section. So it's really up to the group to decide how you want to proceed. If there are any recommendations that you'd like to make today, I'll start recording them. They won't actually go to the board for action until we accumulate all of the recommendations so that we can put the whole financial plan together. But if there are pieces of this that you want to tackle as we go, you have that option to do so. Of course, all of the total STBG funding available amounts that are listed at the bottom of that spreadsheet are what was expected prior to the pandemic. I have not heard yet from VDOT if there are changes to those estimates. And usually there is a little bit of a tweak. And so I haven't heard yet. And then of course, the last year, FY27 is just a reflection of what FY26 was. So I don't know yet what that amount is. So that is the information that I have to share with the group today about STBG. And I'm happy to take any questions. And
Christina, this is Liz. I have a question about the Oak Grove project.
yes.
I mean, some of these increased requests seem to be based on cost estimates from the engineers. Is the $82,000 for Oak Grove based on a cost estimate, or is that the money that was not awarded to the project when we did the awards because we ran out of money?
No, that is based off of new cost estimates and to cover the additional features. Go ahead, Megan.
Sure, I'll be happy to answer that.
Yeah.
It is still funding for the intersection itself. There is a fairly new HSIP project that VDOT is initiating that is installing pedestrian signals and crosswalks at 8 different intersections in the county, some of which also share with the city. And this is one of the intersections that they are designing as a part of that, even though we have a separate funding source. But what they've done is they have a new contractor doing their regional signal contract. And when looking at the project itself and going back through the details and taking into account the new contractor's expenses, VDOT said that this is the additional amount that's needed to install the crosswalks and the pedestrian signals. So it's not the additional scoping that we originally requested with the STBG project. This is just for that intersection, but unfortunately costs have gone up.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Megan.
Sure,
Mr.
you're welcome.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, this is Anita. May I have the floor?
Chair recognizes Anita.
Christina, thanks for that request from the town. Have you all heard that, the Gage Mill redevelopment is moving along? The town received 2 grant money to have redeveloped that property, and the Glade Creek Greenway Phase 2A should be complete by April of this year. So having said that, we feel, and I would like to thank Jay Guy and Salem District Engineering Division. They have been working with us to come up with this cost estimate. So according to Jay Guy, if we do receive the additional funding, we can move with the agreement and so forth. So I really like to be able to receive the additional funding. I know that, not until September, but since this is already funded, portion of it by STBG, we like to request if we can get earlier, if we can submit this earlier request for the project to be funded. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Cronice.
Thank you. I also learned this week that our Roanoke River Greenway projects, West Roanoke River Greenway, is that estimate's coming in high, and we're probably going to need some more money on West Roanoke River Greenway. But we probably will need less on East Roanoke River Greenway. So I don't have numbers yet, but I will get them to you as soon as I can, Christina. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Gray.
Yeah, with some of the unknowns that we're discussing right now, I mean, I would suggest we don't necessarily take action at this meeting, since we can do that at a future meeting when we have all of the information in front of us. I think we'll probably end up being supportive of everything, but I just, I don't think we need to piecemeal it necessarily, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I think there's some, in fact, I was about to ask Ms. Finch if you could elaborate a little bit on some of the projects which we're using this money to leverage for smart scale. Because I'm guessing we'll have a lot more clarity once all that stuff comes out.
Okay, we have, let's see, 9 projects that are on the financial plan right now that have conditional committed funding that are in the smart scale application process right now. So it totals $12.5 million of conditional committed money. And so we'll know more after next week.
Yeah, I would guess, to Michael's point, that could all shift around quite a bit, don't you think?
Yes.
In the current plan, am I correct in reading that there's 102,000 something or other left?
Well, yes, per the estimates that we have that were available, most recent as of last year.
Right.
According to those estimates, we have 102,000 available.
That's with the
FY
old
26
funding as well.
I'm sorry.
That's with the old funding as well. The old funding numbers. They change usually around this time.
They do. I'm not sure that we'll know them before the next TTC meeting. I think it's usually like later in February.
Sure. Okay. Well, not necessarily moving ahead on this. I'm just kind of trying to gauge interest and support. Looking at the 4 items which are on page 34 of the agenda for action, and Christina, am I correct? We can do this at the future meeting once we have the smart scale scores?
Yes.
Looking at those 4 items, just asking, is there any objection to number 1?
What are you counting as number 1?
I'm looking where it says TTC action number 1, remove 1 completed project from the financial plan, exit 140. I'm just going to go through these and kind of ask if there's any issues with them for the purposes of discussion. Does anyone object to number 1, basically is what I'm asking.
Mr. Chairman, this is Cody. I guess just for clarification, it's completely closed out. I mean, I know it's built, completely closed out financially. So any hiccup with doing that?
Yeah, I can't think of one, but I thought I'd ask. Okay. Number 2, accepting the return of the money. And I guess what I'm asking here, is there any objection to that recommendation, also including reallocating that money to the other city project?
I support reallocating that money to their other piece of Roanoke River, this list.
Mr. Chairman.
I would like to know whether that's a possibility or not, and I think that ought to be identified and included in that action. So if there's an avenue through which that might happen, I would not suggest that we approve the action as currently written to accept the return. I'd like to see, reallocation.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Jameson. Mr. Sexton, did you want to speak?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I'm racking my brain to a year plus ago when we did this similar action for other projects. And I seem to remember that a swap, as you and Mark had mentioned, was a little bit either more difficult or just outright not kosher, that we had to actually take 2 separate actions, one to receive the money back and one to reallocate the money. And I'm not disagreeing with what you and Mark have proposed. I just want to make sure that, I think in the past we've had to do 2 separate actions.
And that may be a more kosher way to do it.
Okay.
But basically what I'm asking, rather than the logistics of it, I'm asking, are we sort of in general as a group okay with doing that? That's more the question. I apologize. I should
No, and that's perfectly fine. And so just to echo that, I'm perfectly fine. I would be perfectly fine taking action to receive the money back. I tend to be more in Michael's camp of, before making a decision on where to send the money, having a little bit more information. Not that I disagree with what's been said so far. I just haven't, I just don't know that we have enough information yet. But taking the money back, I'm 100% supportive.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting we take action on that right now. That would be probably at our next meeting when we would have all that additional information. I'm just gauging okayness with it. Anybody else? Okay. Number 3, any objection to that or questions?
And just a clarification, Mr. Chair, that number 3
Yes,
is
ma'am.
now no longer $20,000. It is now $234,000, $234,262.
Additional.
Correct.
Mr. Chair, I have a question on that.
Mr. Jameson?
Anita, could you expound a little bit on that situation? I mean, the original estimate was 169,000, as I recall. So we're
Correct.
more than doubling the cost of the project. Can you help us understand what's going on there?
Yes, we had back and forth with Salem District about that, and the most recent figure that we received mid-December or close Christmas that's the figure that was provided by VDOT Salem District. I'd be happy to email, or if Christina can forward that cost estimate as provided by Salem District, we'd be happy to do so.
Anita, this is Liz. Do you know whether that cost estimate is based on an actual cost estimate, or is it just something that ran through their costing estimate program?
I believe that is based on the actual, based on what, they and using that cost estimate is using VDOT based on their current, if VDOT is to administer the project. And yes, basically I feel that is the real cost estimate based on the discussion with Jay Guy.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Gray?
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with Anita on that. We're trying to get, in the past when we've looked at some projects, if we've looked at them at all, it may have been a very high level kind of look, scratch our head a little bit, figure out some cost estimate and do it and provide it back. We're trying to work internally up at the district now to do a little bit more thorough review when we get these requests, and we would anticipate doing that for our upcoming round as well for any new projects. But have our L&D folks to have a kind of consistent process where when they look at a project, they're developing what we would consider a real cost estimate for a project with the information that we know. Now, I think some of you will understand sometimes the information we know is not detailed enough that allows us to go into a level of detail that gives us 100% confidence or even 80 or 90% confidence. But we may have to have some contingencies in there the less we know about a project. So I guess what I'm really just trying to say is we're trying to do a better job on our end. It's not a exact science by any means, but what Anita got was the best that we could do with what we know about that project at this time. So I would consider it a legitimate cost estimate for what we know right now.
Thank you, Michael, because like I said, we were discussing the project beginning November. In fact, that was the second revised cost estimate provided by Salem District.
All right, any other discussion on that one? Thank you, everyone. Number 4, any objection to that? Questions? All right, well, hearing none, let's go, Christina, if we could have those on the agenda next time, probably after discussion of the funding changes and everything coming out of Smart Scale any of that, we can consider those next time as part of that. Does that work for everybody? Does that work for you, Christina?
Yes.
So Ben, would that include 2 items for the city's 750,000, one to turn it back in and then one to reallocate it?
It could. That's the will of the group. I think Mr. Sexton's point is that is a clearer, cleaner way to do it. I mean, the money would go back into the pot, and we would be then recommending to the TPO that this money came back in, it's here, now we think you should do this with it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is Michael again. Again, I think that's why I would suggest that we put off any actions until we know what they all are. So when we, have our final action that we recommend to the policy board, that we're kind of looking at everything as a package instead of piecemealing it. Because we may find out as we move forward, as we have some things changing with learning more about some of these cost estimate changes, that we may have done something previous that we need to change then. So I would just suggest that we do it all in one shot, but document it as we go along.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Well, and one of the things that's been good about this, I think all along, is having that spreadsheet that shows the whole plan. And thanks to staff and VDOT and all for putting that together. Mr. Gray, would you see us adopting something like that?
Are you saying adopting the
Adopting the plan versus specific motions that might include all of those things in it?
I mean, we can handle that however you want to as a group. We've talked previously about, a lot of things that we as VDOT would prefer this body do, is to give us a list of projects and let us do the programming of the funds. Because I feel like we're in a better position to understand where that money needs to go and talking with our project managers. But if you adopt it as a full package, like we see on page 35 and 36, that's fine as well.
Well, and I'm sure that you and Christina have lots of and the other staff have lots of conversations about, what you guys are seeing versus what they're seeing. And I know, Christina, you've had many conversations with the project managers as well, right? So, I mean, maybe there's a way we can kind of pull all that stuff together. Okay. Christina, is there anything else you wanted to say about this particular item before we move on?
No, that's it for today.
All right. Well, we'll pick that one up again next time. That takes us to item 5. Other business, the update on the FTA 5310 funding in the RVTPO's program of projects. Mr. Hill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me share my screen here, and I've got a very short PowerPoint here. All right, can everyone see that? Okay, I'll assume so. Let's see, just for those of you that have not had any exposure or experience with the FTA 5310 program, here's just some highlights. This is the, call it the program at a glance. The program handles capital projects, which are vehicles and equipment, mobility management, and operating costs for not only the transportation services and then alternatives. And again, it's the 3 types of funding: capital, operating, and mobility management. Operating has not always been a funding category, but it has been at least for the last year or so. For capital projects, especially with vehicles, there's a specific procurement process that DRPT handles. So a recipient would not go out and and seek to directly purchase capital vehicles. The operating mobility management and other projects are reimbursement based based on performance and eligible expenses. The applications aren't approved until typically the June CTB meeting, where the DRPT's 6-year improvement program is then adopted. Available funding is then on October 1st. It's a 12-month period, a demonstration period, and then any funds that are not used by that following September 30th will be deobligated. And then here's a quick little schedule, if you will, of and timeline of the process. This is the FY22 process, and for those that have been involved, it's very similar to the ones in previous years. The human service and mobility provider coordinating meetings, in other words, for other programs, it might be called a how to apply workshop, that sort of thing. That was done in November of last year. Trans-Am data update. Trans-Am is the statewide asset management system where if you're going to be eligible for 5310 funding, you have to update all your assets in order to be eligible. So that update is January 15th. In connection with the submission of the application, which is for 5310 funding on February 1st of this year, the 5-year capital budgets are also due. And again, those are prepared by the applicant or the grantee. There's a second Trans-Am data update on July 15th. For the capital applicants, the coordination with DRPT to customize the vehicle orders and to get the pricing, and that would occur August to October. From November, the entire period, November 21 to October 22, is on a rolling basis is the monthly reimbursement requests based on progress and eligible activities. The local match from for capital applicants is due from September 21 to February 22nd, and then the project closeout, which again you have until the close of that day, September 30th, to spend all your funding. If not, it then is deobligated. Taking a look at FY21's 5310 program vehicles, we're just taking a look at what we've got, what has been approved in the pipeline for 21. We've got 2 of our recipients in the rural category, Lutheran Family Services of Virginia and Southern Area Agency on Aging, too many A's there. They each have funded for replacement paratransit vehicles, and you'll see the federal to local match is an 80-20. The large urban, same thing here with radar replacement paratransit vehicles at 2 at $65,000 each. And then we look at the operating and mobility management grants. Again, in the rural category, we've got 2 from Southern Area Agency on Aging, and then 1 for radar and more. Specifically, there are those 2 for Southern Area are there's a program called Miles to Independence. So that's the first one is the operating for operating there, and then there's the second one is for mobility management. The radar project is for their ADA service operating. And again, that's just a brief overview. There are in the tip for the last couple of years, there've been the southern area folks and the LFS and radar, and I guess just for purposes of information, and I know there's some we do see some new applicants over time, so just wanted to give some information about that. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. It's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but just clarifying for everybody that applicants apply for this money, not to us, but I suppose, is it to the FTA?
It's through, my understanding it's through DRPT, which is passed through from FTA to DRPT. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they apply to them, and then DRPT makes a decision about who receives the award, basically, right? Who receives the funding.
Yes.
And we don't really have input into that decision. Our role in this is that whatever comes out of that, we're going to need to amend into the tip later on. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. That is correct.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the group?
And as I guess a add-on clarification to that, any new projects would obviously be would force an amendment. If it's a modification, which we see those all the time, if it's a modification to an existing project where funds are increased or decreased, as we see rather often, and the scope has not changed, then that occurs without the full-blown amendment process.
Right, thank you. Yeah, the way I kind of was thinking about it is like, this is sort of like some locality writes a grant and they're successful and they get the money, and now we need to add it to the tip. So it is rubber stamping, but this is good to know kind of what's going on and what's being funded in the area. Okay, well, thank you.
Correct. Sure.
I don't see any other questions. I'll ask one last time. Okay, hearing none, then we will move ahead. Thank you, Mr. Hill. That takes us to item 6, comments by members and or citizens. Are there any citizens present? Are there any members who would like to make a comment?
Ben, this is Liz. Could we get a little more clarity on when we expect to get smart scale things?
That was going to be my question, Liz.
Sorry, stole it.
I'll attempt, and I think Christine's probably going to say the same thing. The hope is that that at the CTB meeting there will be this month there will be a draft scenario, if you will, that's a transportation secretariat staff recommendation, and then from there the normal public process occurs, and then it has a way of changing a little bit until finally it's adopted, hopefully in June this year, with a new 6-year improvement program.
At the last CTP meeting, they had said that they were expecting to release the scores at the January meeting. That will be on Tuesday. I looked online before this meeting, and there's no agenda posted yet. So still assuming that's going to be the case.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Gray.
Yeah, that is, less than a week, we'll have some scores coming out. That'll be available to everyone. It'll be available to the public, to y'all, it'll be online. So all that information will be out. Now there will be deliberation like there has in past rounds where, we have our scores and we have the staff recommended scenario based off of the scores. And then, a CTB member can change from that if they want to. We hold meetings with our CTB member starting probably in February to talk with them about any issues that they may have or any concerns or any thoughts or whatever. So there'll be a process of deliberation by the CTB and really each member of the CTB for their district that goes, as Brian mentioned, that really culminates in June with the approval of the final 6-year program. But I think we should probably have a decent idea next week, at least how some of these have done. If they're borderline projects, if they've scored but they're just barely under the line, then we may not want to kick them out just quite yet until those deliberations. We know more about that. But anyway, that information will be out next week. I'm looking forward to seeing it just like y'all are. We are, if you're from the 80s and remember the song, The Final Countdown, that was our theme song this morning with our statewide group that meets and is finalizing the scoring, finalizing the handouts that we do. If you remember, we do the 1-pagers for each project and any last minute issues that we are having some with some of the projects. Luckily, we're not really any in our district, so we're pretty good there. But we're working fast and furious to try to get all the scoring done. Hopefully for us, that'll be pencils down Thursday, and then that stuff can be put together for the CTB meeting next week.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Anyone else?
I'll just mention, Mr. Chair, that we've initiated the meetings with TTC members about the long range plan needs assessment. Thank you, to everybody for making time to have those discussions with us and taking a deep dive into your areas of expertise. So we look forward to continuing those conversations.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Gray, yes.
Yeah, following up on that, Christina, once we do all of those meetings with each individual, will that somehow come back to this group, or how will that information be shared?
Yeah, yes. So we, as we mentioned at the joint meeting last month, we've hired Cambridge Systematics to help us in these next few tasks of the long range plan process. And so they will be working with us to think through. So we've only been looking at current needs so far. And so we also need to be considering future needs, future factors, things to be considering, automation, whatever it might be for the future. So we'll be bringing them in at some point to work with us to think through that stuff. I don't know that they'll be here present during the meeting. We have limited time during meetings, but there might be other ways that they'll be engaging the members. And then looking at prioritizing the needs. So stay tuned.
All right, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, hearing none, that takes us to item 7, adjournment. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Good luck with your smart scale applications, and we will see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.